Welcome to Wilder Wolves, Hall of Fame Mode Fandom. My name is Wilder Adams, and today I am with the man himself today who has been all over between the Timberwolves and Lynx from Media Day to Nafisa Collier, just lighting the WNBA on fire. He's been all over the place. Andrew Dukowitz, my good friend, awesome reporter, podcaster, just rising up the ranks just in time for the Timberwolves NBA season. How is life, my guy?
A little less busy now that the links are done, but as you mentioned, Fee kind of took a flamethrower to the WNBA landscape, so that's kept me busy today. But happy to talk some Wolves. It's nice to get back into the swing of the other 8 months of the year of
Absolutely.
basketball in the Target Center.
No, and you mentioned it. Timberwolves basketball, we're here now. Things are just getting started. In today's episode, we are fully reacting to NBA Media Day. The Timberwolves, from the moment I'm recording yesterday, recorded their media day, and this is going to be coming out a couple days after that. But it's been nuts. And Andrew, when everybody else is ramping up, he has to take a little breather on the bench for a second and get right back on the court between the Lynx and the Timberwolves. And before we really get started, I just want to hear, like, how are you feeling? Are you breathing good? Is life kind of feeling straight with all that's happening at once right now?
Yeah, I did it last year. Lynx going into Wolves. Last year was my first year on the like actual beat with full credentials and stuff. So it was a little tougher last year, I'd say, just because you got to figure out where to go, who to talk to. Thankfully, like the leaders of the beat, your John Krasinski's, Jace Fredericks, Dane Moore, Chris Hine, those guys are just awesome to work with from just like a colleague standpoint. And this season, I kind of know a little bit more of what I'm doing and where my place is and questions in what order. So it's been a little less stressful, but yeah, it's an interesting, I think a lot of the NBA guys take the summer off to, be with family, stuff like that. Thankfully, my wife really enjoys the 2 to 3 nights a week. She doesn't have to put up with me complaining about basketball. So it works out. And I'll always have the kind of self-reflection of like the amount of money people would pay to be able to just talk to Fee, or today Mike was at practice talking and being able to just talk to him about stuff. Like the amount of money people would pay to do that, and I get technically paid to do that. So it's hard to feel too overwhelmed when you're doing something that's really cool.
At the end of the day, it's all fun, right? We're talking hoops. We are talking to, cool people, cool athletes. And speaking of cool athletes, yesterday, from the moment we're recording this, you talked to a lot of really cool athletes returning for the season, the Timberwolves season. And I want to start the show by just giving you the floor on, after listening to all of the athletes, Chris Finch, everybody from top to bottom. What is your biggest takeaway after being around those guys yesterday?
Yeah, and I'll kind of throw some stuff in from today too, because we got to talk to Mike and Nori, Mike Conley, and Rudy Gobert at practice. First takeaway is just they're thrilled to have the same group back. You look at their starting five; all of them are returning. Mike commented that this is the healthiest he's felt, like compared to last season where he wasn't able to shoot or use his wrist for most of the off season. He mentioned this year it was completely different. They got eliminated by Oklahoma City, and he was in the gym pretty much the next day, is still working out, recovering, doing that type of stuff. So I think the kind of cohesion, the continuity is definitely something they're really excited about. You look at their top seven, Dante and Nas off the bench in the starting five, all of them are back, all of them are paid. No one's on an expiring contract out of that top seven, and they all know their roles. Dante made kind of a joke when we asked him about, how different this year has been compared to last. And he said, last year I was on a flight here looking for a preschool for my kid. Like, I think we almost forget about that a year later, that like Dante and Julius, their lives probably sucked for a little bit when that first trade first came down. Like finding schools, finding a house, finding neighborhoods to live in, restaurants that you like, everything. So I do think my main takeaway was just they're really excited to be back. They're really excited to have the same team back. They're excited to build on something. More in the weeds, I would say, you know, they're pretty good at like hiding what like big shifts that they're going to make this season.
Mhm.
But a big talking point has been being better in transition. Mike and Nori today mentioned that they were 27th in the league last year in transition attempts, but they were third in transition efficiency. If you're that good at doing something, you should probably do it more than being the bottom third or bottom three teams. So they are going to put an emphasis on running. Jaden said, he's gotten into a little bit better shape. It sounds like coaches have been on him to get those easy buckets in transition. Mike and Rudy talked about it today quite a bit of just kind of going back to like the basics of basketball. When you're like in second grade learning how to do a 3-man weave, rebounder gets the ball, pushes it to the point guard. The other three guys are already up the court. So there's been a lot of focus on, if Rudy looks like he's getting the rebound, everyone else run except for Mike. Mike stand at the 3-point line, get the pass, and then facilitate. So hopefully like that stuff pays off. I think it is kind of we need to see it before we believe it, because this is a team that last year, Julius, if they didn't get a rebound, they kind of just stood there waiting for the ball. And if you only have one guy running in transition, it doesn't work. The other thing I think that was a pretty big takeaway is just they're really trying to figure out how to be a dominant defense when Rudy is not on the floor, which they mentioned a couple times of like not wanting to change the whole scheme, right? You still gotta at least have like the same lingo, some of the same stuff when Nas is out there or if Julius is playing center. But how can we either attack the ball pressure better, rotate better, switch better when you don't have the anchor behind you in Rudy Gobert that still is one of the best in kind of preventing shots from even going up? I mean, the pass out rate of people that get into the paint with Rudy is still elite. So those are probably my biggest takeaways. I think the other thing is they really have that open Nikhil spot up, and it doesn't
Yep.
seem like anyone has like their name on it yet. I think TJ probably gets the first crack at it. Jalen is obviously going to be looking to try and break those minutes in. Rob has been here all summer working his tail off. Would make sense for him to naturally get those minutes. But then you even got guys like Johan, Johnny Juzang, Tristan Newton. I mean, guys down the roster that are also kind of being told, hey, this is a position that is open. So if
Mhm.
Tristan Newton's shooting 40% from 3 now with his defense size, and he won a championship with UConn. If he's now a good shooter, heck, we might be seeing a ton of Tristan Newton. It's kind of cool to see a team have like an open competition almost for that last rotation spot.
You unpacked on a ton of amazing points that I think throughout the show, we are going to kind of like break down each one in a little more intimate fashion. And I love that the theme from all of that, and I think it's a really valuable, underrated thing that we don't talk about last year's teams lacking. We know this basketball team.
Mhm.
The team last year, after setting the world on fire with the Karl Anthony Towns trade, we like to think, okay, this is still going to be a great defense. And the offense is going to hopefully pick itself up with Dante's shooting and Randall's secondary creation. But we still didn't know the team because all these new faces, and like you mentioned, they're all kind of flying all over the place, figuring out their families, figuring out a new playbook in a matter of days. Like their lives are completely flipped upside down, and they're dealing with the pressure of this team just made the conference finals and they don't want to take a step back. But then also the contract situation last year, you mentioned Nas Reed, Nikhil, Randall, key players who want to get paid. And I just think it's really great that we have that key word continuity. this team, we have a full year. We know this team stinks in transition. We know this team is still pretty darn bad at turnovers. We know that this team defensively, like you said, really good last year, but there's slight things that this team lacks. But I think that is the number one theme of this entire preseason, training camp, media day. The continuity on this team is excellent. They have a full year. They have their money figured out. And we saw how important that was in the second Rudy Gobert year when we had those first wave of extensions with a Nas Reed, with a Mike Conley, right? Players like that. It makes a big difference. And this team just feels like the drama of the Minnesota Timberwolves is as low as I can ever remember it being in the preseason because of that health factor, because everybody's aligned. They're all coming into the season with a month behind their backs with training in Minneapolis. Everybody's been in town this summer. People like each other. They know how to play with each other. Nikhil, incredibly valuable, but you're only down one rotation player out of a top 8, and that's rare for a team that made the conference finals. I think we should be so excited about how the alignment just almost feels too good to be true from all of those perspectives. And we saw it by listening to Anthony Edwards and even a little bit Chris Finch and some other names. They expect to start the year strong. And that's because they're aware of how important their quiet, healthy, continuity filled offseason can be, while teams like Denver and Houston, they're figuring out their new teams, and Oklahoma City is a young team that just won the championship. Who knows if that means a championship hangover? So continuity was a really big deal that you highlighted last month, the last time we met, but everybody else seems to fully align with you on that. So I think that was a really big deal.
Yeah, it's going to set them up to start the season really strong. Again, you look at just 1 through 7, they all know their roles. Dante has a role now. He's not just filling in different places. Everyone's healthy. Everyone's been here, like you said, for about a month. I think Joe was the only, well, Joe and I know Rocco took some time away from the Twin Cities, but for the most part, everyone's been here. So yeah, I think it is setting up for them to start the season strong. I'm still pretty bullish. Like, I think this is going to be a really good regular season team. Like, in my mind, they are going to be the 2 seed. I just, especially with like Fred VanVleet already going down. Memphis is kind of in questions with Desmond Bane being off the team. Clippers are the Clippers right now. Lakers don't have a lot of depth still. It's setting up for this Wolves team to really start the season strong and just go on a pretty ridiculous run. And again, that the thing with the Wolves is we got to see it though. Last season they said a lot of the right things, especially after games, and we still had that weird playing down to their competition, but up to their competition at the same time type of deal. Anthony Edwards was pretty, honest about just he loses some interest in games when it's not on a big stage. Let's see if he can actually kind of back that up and go for league leading in scoring and maybe keep himself more engaged. Point guard is still going to be a big question. I will be honest, everything I've heard over the offseason and everything I saw yesterday and today tells me that Mike Conley is going to be the starting point guard for this team, probably the entire season, unless Rob takes it away from him. But Mike is also really realistic of, he said today in the media scrum that like, I'm paraphrasing, but it was essentially, he's not dumb. He knows that Rob is the future. And whether it's this year, next year, 4 months from now, like Rob will be taking his job. So for Mike, it's how can I make sure that he's best prepared so that I can win when he takes my job? And I think that will be the interesting evolution of the season. But for fans that are really excited to see maybe Mike not be in the starting lineup, I would just refer back to last season. Every player on the team except for Josh Minot had a better plus minus with Mike than without Mike. And he's healthy. I think the wrist injury really kind of stuck with him for the first 3 months of last year.
I love how you brought up the point guard position because if there's any drama with this team, I think that is where I would look at first. I was watching John, Kate, and Dane at their event the other day talk about the point guard position. And, of course, one little story that wasn't a big deal, but it was just a thing. There was, according to John, Rob was slightly disgruntled, not in the way that it was like toxic or damaging, but he felt like he should have played. And he was a high draft pick, first time in that given circumstance on a great team. And then you're playing behind Mike, and Mike's struggling, yet he kept playing, and I get the frustration there, but there's also, like you said, that element, like Mike Conley still knows how to win basketball games. And in fairness to Mike, and I think I wasn't fair enough with him on this, he did spend last offseason hurt. He did have a wrist issue that was legitimate, and it really affected how he played. And that probably compounded with the other adversity he faced on the basketball court to get into a rhythm. So I think it's important to acknowledge that. And I think for that reason, I think he's going to start better if he starts than he did last year because he's coming into this year healthy. And it still feels like, like what Chris Finch talked about, the expectation is still Ant, Randall, Conley leading the team in assists. So expectations are still fully on Mike Conley. But then we go up to the Rob Dillingham situation, right? Talking about that because it feels like you mentioned, it feels like Conley has the job, but Rob has to take it. And just with Chris Finch's coaching style, I think it's going to take a lot to earn that, especially in season when you're trying to win a title. How do you think that the Rob Dillingham situation will be massaged this year? Do you think he can deal with if he's playing 12 to 17 minutes earlier in the year? Do you think that's going to be okay for him?
I mean, what I would say, just to kind of clarify, because I was at a lot of things John and Dane were at this offseason, was, I mean, it's tough, right? He's a 19-year-old kid. He's never not played. He's always been one of the best players on whatever team he is on. And now he's not as good. I mean, let's just be objective and honest about it.
Mm-hmm.
19-year-old point guards in their first year traditionally are not winning players. They don't win you games. Even if you look at like Steven Castle, who was magnificent for the Spurs, they probably would have won more games with more Chris Paul minutes than Steven Castle minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But he's a young point guard. He needs to get his lumps. So, you factor that in of last season, where this is a team that right before the season, they add Randall and they add Dante. Those guys obviously take precedent, right? We got to get Dante's role figured out. We got to get Julius figured out in the rotation. We need these 8 guys that we're going to ride with all season to get as many minutes as possible, because I mean, they didn't even know the lingo of the team when they got here. They literally got here and it was like, this is Naz Reid. Naz Reid, this is Julius Randle. So Rob kind of took this back seat to that already. When you're looking to integrate that type of trade, you're going to play the Joe Ingles. And we saw Joe play at the beginning of the season. You're going to play the kind of safer players that are going to limit mistakes and help these guys gel. And then by the time you look at Christmas, when Rob finally started to come on a little bit, now it's go time. Like, Wolves need to win games. They're falling out of a playoff picture. They had to finish the season as one of the best net rating teams in the league over the last month just to be the 6th seed. You can't play a 19-year-old kid in that situation, because what happens if he's terrible and then his confidence is shot? I think by the end of the year, just from being around the team, I think Rob started to get it of like, yeah, this isn't my year. And he's had good vets. I mean, he has Mike Conley, he has Pablo Prigioni. Naz Reid had to wait for his time for years. Jaden started his career coming off the bench. You even look at like Bones, who spoke on it last year, of like, he's been on the bench for a year and a half after starting his whole rookie season. Like, that sucks.
Yeah.
I think Rob gets it a little bit. What I would say this season is the Wolves don't have all of those extra issues. They don't have to integrate 2 out of their 5 best players into the roster and into the team. So there is more kind of freedom to throw Rob out there and just see what he can do for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And my understanding is if they throw Rob out there and he is good and he is a positive impact player, that job will be his sooner rather than later. But he's still a young point guard. And I think from reading in between the lines and talking to Mike Conley a lot last year, the thing he struggles with most is the like running an offense, slowing it down, getting other players involved, making the right pass, maybe not the like pass that's going to lead to an assist, but the hockey assist that isn't going to get picked off. And when you're looking at a team that's as good as this team,
Mhm.
they're not going to tolerate that come the end of the season. So it could be a situation where Rob is playing 20 minutes a game the first 30 games, and then he goes down to like 10 or 15 for the last 50 games, and then we don't see him in the playoffs at all. It could be a situation where he really takes this opportunity and runs with it. I would just say that the track history on young point guards being good right away is not good. There, I mean, maybe you can count on one hand of like point guards picked in the top 10 that before they turn 23 are like borderline all-stars.
Yeah.
And until he's at that level, Mike's just good. I mean, Mike just, for what he gives up and what he struggles with, his ability to just control the pace, control the tempo, get people organized. He doesn't make mistakes. It's going to be hard to unseat him as the starter, let alone kind of take all of his minutes. That
Mhm.
being said, all of that being said, Mike has been pretty clear that like 25 minutes is probably the max for his body at this stage in his career. That still gives 23 minutes at the point guard position. So again, this is Rob's opportunity to take it.
There's I think, like you said, I think if the expectation is Rob Dillingham better play 30 minutes a game or it's a disappointment, I just want to warn everybody, you're probably going to be disappointed in that case. And that's not even about Rob actually being a disappointment. I loved how you highlighted, first of all, the difference in role when you are, a high draft pick who has all these big brand deals and you're with overtime and, you're at Kanye school and all of these big platforms, but then you come onto a team and then you're playing behind all of these players. I get why that's hard. And that shouldn't
Yeah.
be something that should highlight negatively on Rob's ego or even Finch's talent evaluation. I think
I would
there's a
just real
patience in
quick,
that.
I
There's
would just
patience.
say, oh, I don't think Rob being kind of ticked off at his minutes is a bad thing at all.
Mm.
If Rob wasn't ticked off, I think that's far more concerning than him being irritated that he didn't get enough minutes. Like if he was just sitting there going ho hum, I didn't get to play my rookie year, like it is what it is. I think that's a much bigger problem. Sorry, I just wanted to add that point.
Yeah, it's all a spectrum, right? You need that competitive nature, but if he decides to do Rachel Nichols broadcasts right
Yeah.
after practice, then that's when you cross the line. So it's good to have that competitive nature, and he's clearly a confident player. And like you said, I think Conley at this point, he's probably feeling good about where he stands, physically. Like he talked about, this is as good as he's felt physically in some time. And I think that's a reason to be optimistic because his game has always been mind over size. So unless he completely lost his feet the last couple of years, he should be able to be a functional NBA point guard, and he's one with experience. So yeah, I think the right balance we should view it as if Rob doesn't get an opportunity in the rotation, that's the concern. He wasn't in the rotation year one. I think he should be year two. Like he should have a rotation opportunity. And if he doesn't get that, that's the concern. And then we'll see where he goes from there.
And I would just echo that of like if Rob doesn't get a rotation spot, I think it will be more reflective of Rob this season than the situation. Whereas I think last season it was much more reflective on the situation, the turmoil, stuff going around, kind of the uncontrollable things that Rob can't control. This season, if he doesn't get that spot, it's probably directly related to how he's playing. Or it's related to like a Jalen Clark playing way better than expected, Dante being a really good like point guard all of a sudden, or TJ just forcing the coach's hand. But I do really think Rob is going to get a good leash at the beginning of the season. What I would also just say with fans is, you know, when young players are playing, and as Wolves fans, we have seen lots of young players play, from Wesley Johnson to Derek Williams, Johnny Flynn, Alexei Shved. You can name young, promising players until you're blue in the face with the Wolves organization. Oftentimes, when you're playing young players, you don't get wins. So if Rob's playing 20 minutes a night, maybe it means an extra loss or two on the season. I think it's more about just, where does this lead to? If Rob's playing 20 minutes a night and we get our answer, then that's worth it. If Rob's playing 20 minutes a night and come January, we're still going, is Rob Dillingham good at basketball? That's probably reflective of a missed opportunity by him. So hopefully he takes advantage of it. I like the kid. He's always been nice to talk to. Super good, like, motivated worker. Was here all summer. Did a lot of personal workouts with Mike Conley. I think he's going to have a good chance to take it, but it'll be on him at the end of the day.
And I think a really important thing that stood out to me in media day was, and it starts top to bottom, right? This growing, expectation for attention to detail. And that really felt like it really stood out with Anthony Edwards this year, because every single year we want to say, like, this is the best shape this player's ever been in. This player had a great offseason. We do it every year. Did this guy grow 3 inches? Did this guy gain 20 pounds? But coming into this training camp, outside the fact that he's still completely unfiltered in interviews, Anthony Edwards does seem like he is very intentional about taking that step, not only with just being in great shape, which he is, but also what I think is even more exciting, the attention to detail. He's watching Michael Jordan tape. He's connecting with people like that. More importantly, he's watching tape. And I'm not saying he never did, but it seems like the intentionality of the way he's watching tape, it sounds different, and you can hear it from other players around Anthony Edwards. The attention to detail sounds different. So my question for you is, how did you feel about the feedback on Anthony Edwards this offseason, and how does that align with the steps forward I think we all hope he takes?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, I'd echo, like, Ant is just Ant, right? Like, he's walking up to the podium saying hello to everyone. Like, he's one of a kind, and it never shuts off. Like, he is Anthony Edwards, which is very, in the NBA world, it's very like, it's such a change of pace to just see a guy up there just, like, joking around, having fun. Coming from the Lynx world, I think Lynx fans that are crossover Wolves fans will probably tell you that, like, the Lynx have this type of authentic personalities all the time, but it's really rare in the NBA to have a guy that's like Anthony Edwards, in more ways than one. I would say, kind of, everything I've heard over the offseason is that he's been really focusing on stuff, that he's been really working on kind of the homework assignment that Chris Finch sent him home with, which, that homework assignment was, you need to have a closing game, whether that's a move, whether that's something you can go to in the clutch that isn't just your dribble left-handed step back three. You need something else. Another big part of it was, you need to get better at diagnosing double teams and your dribbling. And the last kind of part of his homework was, just go back to being good at what you're good at, like, finish around the rim, left and right hand, be aggressive, score in transition, rim rock. Like, that was his homework. It sounds relatively simple, but when you have a guy like Anthony Edwards, who's, already being said as the fourth or fifth best player in the league, like, if he can just do those things, he goes from fourth or fifth to one or two. I think what's been encouraging is, he did say that he worked on his ball handling a lot this offseason, that, normally he doesn't work on it because his back or something. Anthony Edwards trying to be funny, I'm sure, but Well, it was funny. He wasn't trying to be. It was Anthony Edwards being funny and succeeding at being funny because I did laugh.
He's
But
good at it. He's good
um,
at it.
he,
Yeah.
he's very good at being funny. But he worked on his ball handling a lot, which I think from year one to year two, the Wolves made that a very big point of emphasis. He took it very seriously, and he went from a below average ball handler to a guy that can get to his spots relatively easily. If he has gone from that to a Trey Young, Steph Curry, like able to just create space at will, who knows? We won't know until the ball's rolled out. He worked on his post game quite a bit, post fades, bank shots, that type of stuff, so that he's not only setting up at above the break. And he kind of mentioned specifically, like when a double team comes in the post, then I can get the ball out quicker and it forces them to get into rotations differently, which to me is, I've always thought Ant understands the game really well, but he's maybe not good at like articulating what he understands. To me, that really sent a message of like, oh, he's starting to get it. Like, this is what is the difference between a 24-year-old and a 28-year-old is they start to understand where they can set up, where they can do things. So just off of those two things, I'm pretty confident he did his homework over the offseason. He's been in Minneapolis for a while now. He never really left. Went down to Atlanta for a little bit, went on the China tour, but other than that, he's been here. And if he accomplished what Chris Finch wanted to check off that box, I mean, if you have an Anthony Edwards that can score at the rim again, and Anthony Edwards that has a post game, whether it's footwork, fades, bank shots, hooks, who knows? And then if his ball handling has really improved from the B plus that it is now to an A, I mean, that's going to change a lot of things for this team. I think what's difficult as someone covering Ant is we have seen Ant really go into the summer and I mean, perfect things. His dribbling from year one to year two was unreal. His 3-point shooting from year 4 to year 5 was transcendent.
Yeah.
Who knows? I mean, until we see him on the court, I hesitate to set a bar for that guy because he's been putting in the work.
He's one of those dudes, and there's very few people like this. There's just some people who are so darn talented that there's no such thing as a weakness they can't get better at. They could just
Yeah.
walk into a year and become the best shooter. They can walk into a year and have a great handle. He decided one summer he was going to use the glass, which he never did in his life, and became elite at it in 1 year. He's always had that talent, that ability to master things incredibly quickly. But I think the really exciting thing, even though he did mention like all these things I'm working on, and I feel like every player kind of talks like that, he's in his 6th year now. And Nas Reed, Jaden McDaniel, same thing. This feels like the start of the next wave in their career when they're not just young players. They're not just figuring it out. These guys are on long-term contracts, expected to be core pieces on a contender. That is a different expectation. And that requires not just being talented and skilled, but an articulation, like you mentioned, an attention to detail that is incredibly critical. And I think that's what makes this year feel a little different from Edwards. Maybe he walks in and decides he's Luka as a playmaker. I don't know. I'm not counting it out with him. But more
Yeah.
importantly, it's the nuances that felt like he was missing. Shea and Luka, they what they have one step above Anthony Edwards is they thought the game better. And I'm not saying Ant doesn't think the game. He's at a good level. But those people, they're savants at it. And they know how to prepare. And they know how to set up an offense. And they know where to be. And they know how to watch film. These very little things that young players rarely ever do. It sounded like this offseason, while staying in tip-top shape, he also is really focused on those little nuances, which to me is always separated a Shea or a Luka from him at this point in time. But the fact that he seems so deliberate about it, I think that's the number one thing I'm watching Anthony Edwards in the preseason for. How much further ahead is he with the little things, the little nuances?
Yeah. I mean, what I would just say is, Shea and Luka both came in the 2018 draft, I believe. So
Mm-hmm.
they're 2 full NBA years ahead of Ant. I mean, if you want to go a step further with Luka, he's been playing professionally since he was like 11. So that dude's processing is probably that of like a 35-year-old because he's just seen so much adult basketball in his life.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that's, I don't know if it's scary with ants or how I would like put a word to it. But Luca always had the drawback of he's not ever going to be a good defender. Like he's not an elite athlete. He's just never going to be able to keep up with people. Ant can. Ant can defend 1 through 4. I mean, I've seen him decide in a game to just shut Jaren Jackson Jr. down at halftime, taking him up after the game was getting out of hand. And when you look at Shea, it's kind of the same thing with Shea. I mean, up until this last year, it was, can he score at all 3 levels? Can he be an above average defender? All of these things, which you just don't have to worry about with Ant. So while I
Mm-hmm.
think Ant is taking the right steps, I think he is focusing on more of the details. He's also 2 years younger, 2 NBA years younger than those players. So when we're looking at like Ant in his 6th season, if you look at Shea 2 years ago, that wasn't an OKC team that we thought was going to win a championship at the time.
Yeah.
That was J-Dub's rookie season. You look at Luka. I mean, that Mavericks team was good, but I don't think anyone thought they were winning a championship 2 years ago.
Can I rebuttal
Made
that
it to
real
the
quick?
championship. Yeah.
Yeah, like what I would say though for those two players, year 6 was the year where things really came together. That
Yep.
Thunder team was a number 1 seed. Shea was giving you over 30 and really good defense for his type of player. Luka Doncic led his team to the finals. Like this is kind of the
Yep.
year where yeah, you're really good, you're really talented, but now it's I don't want to
This is I call it the proof of concept year. Like
this
this
is you're
year,
the MVP,
they
bro. Like
probably don't win a
yeah.
championship. Like I'll just be honest, this year is probably not Wolves hanging a banner type of year. I think they'll be really good in the
Andrew
regular season,
Andrew's a
struggle in the
hater, man.
playoffs.
Andrew's a hater.
But
Just
this
kidding.
is the year where we should see something from Ant that you saw in Luca, you saw in LeBron in his last year in Cleveland, you saw in Shea, like you said, number 1 overall seed. And if we see that glimpse, then it's off to the races. Because, like you said, Jaden's here, Nas is here. They have young talent waiting in the wings. They're set up for this next kind of era. It's now just Ant. What's his ceiling? Which he's already a top 5 player in the league. So, what's his ceiling going to end up as?
This is the year where he's not a little kid anymore.
Yeah,
This is the
that's
year
fair.
where he's young. He's still young. Of course, he's still young. But we have enough of a proof of concept, and the expectations have been brewing for him for years. When you're in your 6th year, it's kind of the year where you're like, I'm here. I'm not just a high level tier 2 player, which I think he was last year, kind of in that high level second wave of players. This is where he should be, knocking at the door like I'm in these rooms. I can have lunch with Shea and Luca because those last 2 seasons, and this doesn't mean he was behind. He wasn't. He was very much ahead of the game,
Yeah,
but
he's very far ahead.
very far ahead of the game. But like,
Jaden McDaniels is the traditional rookie path where it's like
yeah,
frustrating, but he's good. So, like, what do you do? Ant is just kind of kicking the doors down as he's going.
his standard is literally like the NASA people. So this isn't like, oh, Edwards is behind or he's disappointing. He's very much ahead of the game. But like those 2 years, you can see the maturity gap. But Edwards is now in the year where he's as old as those guys were when you can just see the maturity difference. Like if
Yep.
Ant and Paolo meet together or Ant and Wemby, the expectation is we see that maturity difference where it's like, you
Mhm.
guys are as talented as me, but man, you know what? You can't sit at my lunch table because I've been here and I know how to play the game. That's where Edwards should be this year, which is why I think the emphasis this offseason is so great for him that it sounds like the deliberate nuances, little things that I really think you start putting together around year 6. That's where he should take a big step. This won't be the smartest or best version of Anthony Edwards this year. He's young. It
Mhm.
shouldn't be. But this should be the year where it's like, I'm not a kid anymore. I'm a vet. I'm a legit vet now. He's as old right now as when Cat had Anthony Edwards on his team his rookie year. If we put it into real
Yeah.
context. So I just
It is going to be one of the, I would just say, I know it's going to be a storyline this season of if or if not if Ant or if he does not win a championship. It is still, you can count on one hand in the last 20 years how many people have won a championship under the age of 27.
yes.
It's Steph, Shea, Tatum, and Giannis, not Shea. Shea's 27. So Steph, Giannis, Tatum, end. Like, it doesn't happen to be the best player on a championship team before you're 27, unless you're going to go down as like potentially one of the greatest of all time. So if he wins a championship this year, I think then you're switching the entire narrative on Ant of like, okay, this guy is it. I think if he makes another Western Conference Finals, if he leads the league in scoring, if he wins an MVP, all NBA first team, if he makes the championship, I think those are what I'm setting my expectations for, of like, be in the top 3 MVP voting, make the Western Conference Finals or the finals again, get all NBA first team, show me these things you've been working on. And if he does that, I'm considering it a win. Now when
This
he
isn't
turns
ESPN.
27 2 years from now, then it's fair game to be like, it is championship or bust every year for Ant.
This isn't ESPN, right? We're not going to do the if Ant doesn't win a title this year, will he ever win a title? This isn't clickbaity.
Right.
I would just say, like it's the 27 and under rule. I think is really interesting because I think winning a title goes so far beyond just one player, which is why
Mhm.
it's so rare to put it together before age 27. Because usually it's like, in my opinion, you get there year 6, year 7, and then it's like you have a 1 in 7 chance every year, pretty much. And then
Yeah.
more often than not, it's going to be year 4, year 5, year 6 of that window when you win the title. And by then you're like 26. But then there's like a Dwayne Wade or a Shea or Tatum, and they just figure it out early. I think Edwards, his path most similar in the NBA right now is kind of Tatum, where Tatum was just in that conversation right
Mhm.
away all the time. It's kind of why people had the illusion of Shea being younger than Luka because Luka was there longer, and why people assume like Cunningham's way younger than Ant when they're like the same exact age. It's all an illusion. But I'm not, like you said, let's not evaluate him if he's a champion or not. That's going to determine his value. I just want to see on the court, like, did he take that next step maturity wise? Is he officially not a young player with the way he reads the game? That's the number one exciting thing.
And there was signs of it. I mean, that's the fun thing of covering a team like this, where you're watching games back and kind of trying to pay attention to things a little bit. Not saying that like fans don't pay attention to it, but like when you have to watch every game twice, you just see different things. And like, there's been signs. I mean, he sees the double drift in, he sees someone go into the dunker spot, and he hits the corner immediately. Like, there are these signs that he started to get it last year. I think, again, like, I will be fully transparent. Like, I enjoy Chris Finch as the coach here.
Yeah.
I think his homework that he gave Ant was perfect. Like, you need a couple moves you can go to close. And again, that's the thing with Ant, though. I mean, he could come in this season and his dribbling could be so good that he can just get to his spot like Chris Paul has for 25 years and hit a free throw line jumper, and then games are just over. I would be, the one thing I would really be shocked at is if he comes in the exact same. If
Yeah.
it's still high volume threes, a lot of pull-ups, late game offense is pretty bad. He's not looking for teammates. He's not running on breaks. He's not, elevating defensively a little bit. I'd be pretty concerned then, because then it's like, what happened? But there's no part of me that really thinks that's going to happen. I think it's more of just a wait and see to see what he's actually put into his game, because it'll be pretty apparent within the first couple weeks of the season. Because as Ant is always one to do, he wants to show off how good he is at his new thing. That's why at the beginning of last season, we saw him shooting 10, 12 threes every game. And for the first month of the season, everyone was going, oh my God, Ant, stop shooting. Turns out he was right. So my guess is whatever he has new in his bag, we are going to see it often and early.
And transitioning from Anthony Edwards to, some of the further down things on the team, right? I think something that was really impressive to me was, of course, every year they say the right things in post games and stuff like that, but it did sound like with how last year went in the regular season, I loved how emphatic they were toward just the little things that this team has always been missing. And that is one, clutch time offense, which a lot lies on Anthony Edwards there. But number two, just not playing down to competition. And we heard Jaden and Nas and Ant and Finch talk about it. And those are the people I actually look at the most in that conversation because it is a maturity thing. And that's something that your young players especially have to leave with, as well as Rudy and Randall, of course, but especially those young three players. So, how did you feel about the team's attention to detail in those respects? Do you think that's actually something that they're seriously going to be more focused on than they were last year? Where do you think on that?
Yeah, I mean, all of them said the right things on media day, right? We got Mike and Nori at practice today, and he echoed all of those things as well. Of like, this is a team that needs to realize that. I think he used a golf metaphor of like it's a lot easier to cut your handicap down 10 points than it is to get it down the final 2 or 3. Now it's on the margins, right? It's running all the way to the corner and not just stopping above the break on a fast break. It's following a cut to the basket all the way through to the opposite corner and not just cutting to the basket and then kind of shuffling baseline. It's picking a player up at half court instead of the 3-point line when a game plan calls for it. The frustrating part with covering a professional sport is we just don't know. We don't know if that is just what they are talking about or what they're actually going to do. I
Mhm.
think benefited the doubt, you know, this team has been really intentional with a lot of the things that they have worked on in the past, whether it was getting Rudy involved, whether it was expanding Ant's game. I'd like to believe that, yeah, like this next season, they're going to be better at playing lesser teams. They're going to be more attentive on fast breaks or on offensive plays, end of game execution. What I would say is, again, we're going to find out pretty quickly if that was just talking points or if that fully sunk in and is now part of their DNA. Because I mean, let's just be honest. If Jaden ran the floor, if Jaden and Ant ran the floor after every offensive rebound, that's probably 10 points between the two of them. Like
Mhm.
Jaden's such a freakishly athletic guy. Ant can dunk on anyone. If they're both just sprinting down the floor, that's easy points. So if we start to see that this season, means that what they were talking about clicked in. It's just really hard to know if it's right now a talking point or if it's something that they are truly invested in. I think the optimist in me says that they're invested in it and that's going to be a change this season. But again, you just don't know until they roll the ball out. That is the one like kind of fun thing about covering sports though is you always get your answer, right? Like they will play basketball and we will find out relatively soon if they're going to be a good transition team.
I think all of that just ties together in such a good way because, like you said, one, we're going to figure it out. So, what's talked about and what's executed, those are two different things. And of course, all we have is media day right now. So, we can just kind of ride in the waves of everybody thinks they're making the playoffs and this is the next big year. And all of these things are going to get figured out. We don't know until things get figured out. I do think, though, with the way things are positioned right now, whether they do it or not, they have no excuse to not put it together on those little detail things, right? There isn't this massive roster change at this point in time.
Mhm.
Nobody had a physically heavy offseason where they're coming into the year not feeling right or feeling hurt. People know each other. People are fresh. We had a full year where we saw what held this team back from being a 2 or 3 seed last year. So if they come back into this year and they just do the exact same thing last year, then we could be much more confident it's in their DNA than just a lot of tough given circumstances, which was the nature of last season. So I think it's good that they're talking about it, because right now it's like you can't make an excuse on continuity. You can't make an excuse on we've seen it, we haven't seen it. We've seen all of it, and they have all of the advantages that a lot of other teams don't have. So at the bare minimum, like if you're a fan, this is the year. If they're not doing those things, if they're not making that extra tough rotation defensively, if they aren't diving for a ball, if they aren't running in or in transition, if they're falling asleep mid-court when they're playing the Hornets on a January Wednesday night, if those things are still problems, it's much easier to point down at the core issue. And unfortunately, that core issue is less extrinsic and more intrinsic, which means it's harder to change. So I think we're going to get more answers, even to a bigger extent than last year, on just the genuine DNA and maturity of this team.
Yeah, and the way they've set up contracts is that if come February it is not how they envisioned it, or if chemistry is an issue or players are not bought in, I mean, Randall is on a 1-and-1 deal. He can be traded pretty easily this offseason. Rudy's contract this season is a lot easier to swallow if you're an opposing team. Even down the bench, like Dante, they're young players. So the Wolves have really set themselves up for a really good, not only just like a really good season. And again, I just to stress the point, like I do think this is a 2 seed season for them. Like that is kind of my regular season expectation for them. I'm not going to say they're championship again, but even if this team isn't bought in or as good as people thought, they have a lot of you know metaphorical bullets in the chamber that they can pull of Rudy trade, Julius trade, Dante trade, Mikeson expiring. They can revamp this roster relatively quickly around Ant, Jade, and Nas and kind of get rid of all of that older talent if it's not clicking. So they've set themselves up good, and that's a credit to Tim Connolly. That's a credit to Chris Finch. It's a credit to Ant having a pull to him that makes players like Nas Reed want to come back, or make free agents like Joe want to come here in the first place. It's going to be a fun season, though. I'm excited to see how the other thing I will say, and this is just me on my soapbox, I will not panic until January 1st. I set that rule last year. I had that rule the year before. I will not be doing any panicking until January 1st. So if you ask me what my panic meter is before January 1st, I will simply tell you I'm not panicking until January 1st.
Don't worry, man. I got your job for that. I can panic for you. It's okay. But no, I think you're totally right. I think patience is important. But like you said, I think this is the big contrast with the team 2 years ago when Cat, Rudy, and Ant are on track for Supermax contracts. There's movement that can happen on this team. This isn't a team that's stuck in any stretch of the imagination. And like having 7 of your 8 rotation guys back, I think before we end the show, I think I'm especially intrigued on the bench, seeing specifically how they replace Nikhil. We talked about it. They were asked about that. A couple players had to answer it. Finch had to answer it. But, the implementation of those young players like a Terrence Shannon, Jalen Clark, and even like, redefining Dante's role as more niche than last year. I think that's going to be a really interesting thing to watch in November and December, because that's the time of the year, right before January 1st, where you're really going to start playing with those things. So what are your like final opinions on how they're going to, potentially address that, even though we haven't technically seen it on the court yet?
Yeah, I think the kind of difficult answer is it's up for grabs. I mean, I don't think they have a clear-cut fix of who's going to replace that yet. And when that's your 8th spot in a rotation, I think that's a really good thing, because then you have Terrence Shannon who has to prove himself. You have Jalen Clark who has to, shoot shoot well. I mean, to be honest, he needs to shoot well if he wants that position. You have Rob that's going to be fighting for that. You have rookies in the building. Juzang, who has been, a starter part-time for Utah. It leads for that competition, but the competition is far enough down the roster that you're not threatening any of your big kind of 7 key pieces. I also think this is a really good opportunity for them to expand the rotation to 8 or 9, because or not 8 or 9, I should say 9 or 9.5, because they had 8 last season. I I think it was harder to navigate than maybe we reported on, or we really understood, of just, Nikhil deserves 30 minutes a night. Dante deserves 30 minutes a night. Nas deserves 30 minutes a night. Your starters should be playing 30 minutes a night. How the heck do you get anyone else in there? How do you mix
Yeah.
it up? How do you get different rotations? This year, they don't really have that. They have this one slot that they can break up into 2 or 3 guys. They can give them all to Terrence if he impresses enough. They can spread it between Rob and Clark if they need to do that. It just leads to a little bit more like creativity, I think. But I'll just to answer your question, I think Terrence Shannon's going to get the first crack at it. I think they are really high on him being around the team at Summer League. Everyone was very high, like spoke very highly of him. Kevin Hansen, the coach down there, talked really high of TJ. Jalen Clark, I think, probably has the next crack at it, just because that guy is, I mean, he's sitting there in his media day talking about how he studies D backs using their hands in pass defense. Like, that's basketball sicko type of stuff. If
Yeah.
that's what you're doing in your off season. And then I think Rob has a really good chance of getting that 8th spot too. But like we talked about earlier, that'll be dependent on more if he takes it than the team, giving him that spot just to give it to him.
And I think that's what makes the words. I think that's what makes preseason especially fun this year, because last year, even though of course it's so fun to see a brand new team and Julius Randle in a Timberwolves uniform against the Bulls and all those little things, this team feels like there's more room for people to take opportunities in all levels than it was earlier. Like, I can even talk about, like, if there's a world where Jaden McDaniels just takes a huge leap on offense, nobody's stopping him from becoming the second best player in Minnesota, right? Like, there's, if that world is there, like the top 5 percentile outcome, there's no political issue on the team that's going to make that a problem. Whether it's
Mhm.
like if there's a Cat or Rudy caliber contract, it's kind of Ant and then just like 4 contracts kind of similar after that, kind of like a pyramid. So I think that's a very fun thing about this preseason. While this team seems like it's very bankable relative to other teams, at the same time, it feels like there's more flexibility, which I think is also probably better for the team morale, because there's going to be less arguments like, oh, you're only playing this guy because he's getting paid this. And what about my money and all of this? It's just like everybody has similar contracts and all the core players are here multiple years. I don't remember the last time this has ever been the case for Minnesota.
Yeah, like you said, even a couple of years ago. I mean, Rudio was looking for a max contract. Mike was looking for a contract extension. Cat was 3 years ago signing his super max extension. I mean, it's very rare that you have everyone locked up and kind of good to go. Now, that's not to say, like, Julius, his deal is essentially a 2+1. So it's not like he's signed for 5 years, but it's really not going to be until next year that he needs to start thinking about what his next like
Yeah.
move in life is going to be. Rudy has 3 years left on his 2+1. Again, doesn't really have to think about it. This is kind of the situation where you see players sacrifice their own maybe personal stats to win a championship, knowing that it's not this year they need to do to kind of show out. It's next year. It sets up for a really special opportunity for this team, which kind of, to get back to the whole thing, it's just like it's on Rob Dillingham to take the starting spot. It's on the Wolves to take that next step, because there is a lot of things that theoretically should be easy fixes that would probably lead to them winning 5 or 10 more games this year. It's on them if they do it. And media day, again, they said all the right things. Vibes were good. Everyone was in a good mood. Surprising how many people were pumped Joe Ingles is back, which, like, I knew last year everybody loved Joe, but like they really love Joe. So
Yeah.
it's going to be fun. I mean, it's going to be a fun season for fans. It's going to be a fun season to cover, and hopefully they get to, another conference finals. But again, I would just say set expectations if you're a Wolves fan around, like, can Ant get into that top three? Is Jaden on all defense again? Because the reality of it is Oklahoma City still exists, and that team is still going to be a buzzsaw in the West, especially come playoff time. And the Wolves didn't really do anything to address that other than keep the band back together and kind of roll the ball out and see what they can improve on. But that being said, we don't know what Ant's going to look like this year. So maybe he just fixed Oklahoma City by himself.
Yeah, if Anthony Edwards could just take down OKC by himself, that wouldn't be a problem. But we would not complain about that. But I also love that you like briefly mentioned Joe Ingles, because I also think another reason, and this show, I'm sure if we're all listening to this, it's like this show is too positive right now. And I am not saying that there can be poor given circumstances that happen in the regular season. Something always happens. So just it's inevitable. The question is how extreme those given circumstances are. But this does feel as solid as it could be for September 30th, 2025. And even like Joe Ingles and Bones Highland, you go to the bottom of the roster and it just players who have either a resume or a talent level, but they seem like good people who don't get in the way that much. Even if a player like Bones is talent wise capable of giving you something, I think it's a good mix. You have talented players who don't seem to be disgruntled yet, and the health, the continuity. It's going to be a very interesting year to see how many of those positive factors remain. And my good friend Andrew Dukowitz from Zone Coverage, you're awesome, man. You do a great job. You work so hard out there, and I love what you do, man. You're doing great.
Appreciate it, man. Always fun to jump on here. I will just say on your pod, since I got you, I did a Lynx post game pod all Lynx season that thankfully did well. So Wolves fans that listened, I appreciate you. Lynx fans, you guys are crazy. You already know that. But because of that, I am going to be introducing a post game Wolves live that I will be doing from the bowels of the Target Center after the lovely people finish their press conferences. And I'll be having, local guests. Wilder, you're more than welcome to come on one if you're up that late.
I'm down.
And I'm actually, the debut of it came out on Monday after media day. Sneaker reporter Travis Singleton was on it. Chris Hine is actually joining me tomorrow of the Star Tribune to kind of do the same thing we did today, except for, more Chris Hines and Andrew and maybe not as positive. If you want a more negative spin.
We have so many just different great personalities in the Timberwolves media community. Just so many different. I mean, Dane's great, Kyle's great, Chris Hines great, Britt's great. Like Andrew's great. And everybody has their own unique spin locally, and it's a blessing to be just a part of this community. We as Wolves fans being able to consume this all the time. Andrew, you're fantastic. You do great, and everybody, if you haven't subscribed yet, would sincerely appreciate it. The season's really getting going now, so we're really going to pump out content consistently on this show as we scream, we cheer, we cry. We're doing it all on the podcast throughout year. I'll panic. We'll all panic. We'll cheer. It's the nature of being a sports fan and a part of a sports community. Thank you all so much. This is the Wilder Wolves Hall of Fame Mode Fandom.